Friends, if you haven't liked and subscribed on YouTube, please do that. That means so much to us. Share the podcast with people who you think might find value in it. We work really hard on this, so every additional view, like, and subscriber really does mean a lot to us. And on your favorite podcasting application, your Spotify, Apple, Audible, so on, please give us a 5-star, leave comments on the episode, do anything that you can because it does make an impact, not only on the algorithm, but us. As creators, we like to know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, or if you ever want to hear more from a guest or less from a guest or a different type of guest. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy this one. Wade, my guy, how's it going, man?
Pretty good, just chilling out.
Wade, I love talking to people like you. You are an interesting fella just by biography. So I'm sure I'm going to dig into some interesting facts once we actually hear from you. But Wade, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
All right. So I'm Wade Simmons. I'm an independent filmmaker, also a licensed funeral service worker, and I trained for pro wrestling for 2 years. I've been in the funeral business for 13 years, and just this year I started my own removal service, so I've been pretty busy with that.
Removal service, what is that?
So basically, whenever someone loved ones passes away, normally the funeral home has to have somebody to transport the loved one to the funeral home. So I have a business that does that.
So you're picking up dead bodies.
hmm And I never thought, and honestly, I've been in the funeral business for 13 years, but I never thought that I would start my own removal service. But I mean, that's kind of how life is, right? Sometimes you start one journey and you end up doing a whole lot of stuff you never thought you'd be doing.
Well, I was listening to a podcast you were on, and you said when you were a kid, you wanted to be a mortician and a
Yep.
filmmaker. So we'll put filmmaking to the side because I can understand how you might want to be a filmmaker as a kid. That seems like a cool, fun job. But like, take me back to being a kid. What in the world made you think, yeah, you know what, I could be a mortician?
I grew up in church and everything, and went to a lot of funerals. But actually, when I was a little child, I almost drowned in Kansas City, and I don't remember. Like, I don't want to say it was an out of body experience or anything, but I had
Mm.
kind of like a near death experience where, like, as a child, I said I saw angels fighting in the water. So I think from that standpoint on, like, it didn't really creep me out. But from that standpoint on, like, I just always felt like I wanted to be a mortician. Like, even when my grandfather died, I think I was in like 7th grade or whatever.
Mm.
And me and my uncle went to view his body, which ended up being a funeral home that I would end up working at years later. But yeah,
Mm.
just it was pretty interesting job, and so I pursued it. And I know a lot of people's like, why would you want to do that? But I guess it was just in me to do it.
How old were you when you had that near drowning experience?
It might have been like 5 or 6. I
Mm.
still remember it. Like, I vaguely remember it, but I know it happened. So like I said, I believe that kind of triggered me to be interested in doing that type of work.
What do you remember about it? It sounds like it was a brush with death that made you, I don't want to say like accepting of death, but it's sort of just you realized it's a thing, it's there.
So
It's
all I
a
remember
reality.
is like I was underwater and like I saw angels like fighting.
Mm.
I don't remember deeply what they look like, but all I know, I just saw them in the water fighting. It's really unique though. Like, because I remember like my great grandmother said that like she saw like a light shining on the water and all type of stuff. So
Mm.
it was like a miraculous experience. Trust me.
And then
Yeah.
what, did someone rescue you?
Yeah, my uncle, when I like all I remember is like when I came up out the water, like my uncle had me in his hands.
Mm.
Like my uncle jumped in the water and just like pulled me out.
Interesting. So after that, you kind of just like developed this kind of comfort with death almost. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So talk to me about becoming a mortician. I also heard you say that mortician school. I would have had no idea that there was a
Oh
mortician
yeah,
school out
oh
there.
yeah, that's kind of like a lot of people's nightmare, the school part. But yeah, I went to school to be a funeral director, and for me, it took quite a while because like the course was really hard.
Mm.
I'm not gonna lie, like a lot of people go to school for it, but then a lot of people end up not doing it because like the test is just So by the grace of God, like after trying for like 6 years of trying to pass this exit exam, I finally passed it, and I was finally able to, sit for my boards and get my, apprentice license for now. But it's been quite of a journey. But I can tell I really love that business because I kept fighting until I got my license. So, you
So
know.
what's the difficulty about the mortician license exam? Like, what are you actually being graded on?
So basically, a lot of it is like anatomy and chemistry.
Mm,
So like the funeral director part is like the merchandise and comforting the family, making arrangements, doing the legal paperwork and things like that, death certificates and stuff of that nature. And that part wasn't too bad, but like the science part where you're doing like the embalming and the anatomy. And like I said, to be honest, the embalming process, if you've been in the business long enough, you pretty much know what to do. But of course, when you go to school for the academic purposes, they kind of, make things a little more complicated.
mm. So talk to me about life as a mortician. So you graduate, clearly you get this, and then you said you had to do an apprenticeship?
So yeah, but like I said, but way before I even went to school, I was in the business already for quite a long time. Like I worked for one of the more popular funeral homes in Chicago by the name of Leak and Sons Funeral Home.
Mm.
Really cool people. Anything you need, they look out for you. And I mean, for the most part, I spent, most of my, youth with them, working with them. And a lot of times I would even stay at night, stay overnight sometimes at the funeral home.
Whoa.
But I mean, yeah, like,
That's like a start of a scary movie. High school kid working at the mortician's office, stays overnight, and then chaos ensues.
yeah, man. But like, being in that business though, like, you meet a lot of cool people, you meet a lot of cool families. But I mean, for the most part, like, I think it can make you like really adventurous though, make you
Interesting.
kind of want to enjoy life a lot more.
I could see that. I could see that. I mean, you are literally face to face with death all of the time. So a lot of people, they do the opposite. They want to take the thought that death is going to happen. They push it as far out of their mind as they possibly can. But that's like an American thing. Not every culture is like that. I know there's certain cultures where they literally celebrate the dead. They
Yeah.
talk about the dead. If you know, Roman emperors would have someone that followed them around that said "Memento mori," it's remember you will die, and they would say that over and over again, not as like a spooky, gory, scary thing, but like a hey, you need to cherish this thing while you have it,
Yeah.
sort of.
Absolutely. Like working in that business really would teach you like to really like value life, value people. And I mean, like, it teaches you like not to take things for granted. So like I always tell people, you treat people right, try not to fall out with people, and whatever you want to do in life, like, don't put it off too long, just go for it.
Mm. So you were working at this mortician previous to actually getting your what is it? Is it a license? Is it?
Yeah, so basically what happened was, like I said, I worked at Leak and Sons Funeral Home for 13 years. And I mean a lot of great people, where there was like a family, ups and downs, but for the most part, it's literally like a family. And I was there for 13 years, but then I ended up getting married.
Mm,
And once I got married and stuff like that, like I started more so kind of, venturing out, just trying to see what was the best move. So in the process of waiting for my license to come, I ended up leaving the funeral home to kind of get myself together and stuff like that. And then I ended up starting my own business.
yeah, I definitely want to talk about your business because it's a little bit different. It's still in the death industry, if you will. But so talk me through like what life is like at a funeral home on a day-to-day basis. And then I talk to a lot of business owners, so I think it's interesting to find out like the economics of the business. But talk me through what are the things that a funeral home's doing? How are they making money? What are the things that obviously I just want to hear it from start to finish eventually, like
Okay.
how we preserve a body. But talk me through the things that the funeral home is going to do and coordinate for a family.
So basically, I always want to start out by saying this is that, the funeral industry, it is a business, but it is one of those business where like it has to kind of be in your heart to do it.
Hmm.
Because I mean, you're dealing with people at like one of the worst times of their life. And I think for the most part, you try to start out, the day with the best attitude that you can start out. Like whatever you got going on in your personal life, you don't want to bring that to work. You
Mm,
know, you want to leave that wherever, because when you go there, somebody could potentially be calling you on the worst day of their life. But
mhm,
I mean, for the most part, like, at the funeral home, a lot of times, you just go in. If somebody has a death call, you would take it, and you would, let the family know that you would be there to remove their loved one. And I
mm,
mean, for the most part, it's like, you're just pretty much there if a family needs you. Now, one thing you don't want to do is, like, you don't want to be pushy. If a person wants to use you, they'll use you.
mm,
I think that's one thing about that business is, like, for the most part, like, most families have their particular place they like to go. Now, you do have some families that just, maybe they're not sure, but for the most part, you just try to give them the best service that you can give them. So basically, if a family does decide to go with you, you would make arrangements with them. You would just, have them come in to see what what they like what way would they want to celebrate their loved one, like, not the way that you feel they should, like what way would they want to, like, would they want to have a burial, would they want to have a cremation, would they want to have, no service, would they like to have a service, would they like to have it at a church, or would they like to have it at a golf course, or so it's just pretty much kind of like being an event planner, pretty much.
mm,
And then if you are also an embalmer, then you would handle, like, the preparation of the remains. You take the loved one into your care, and just, prepare the body so that the person looks the best that they could look.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
what you said is actually really interesting about kind of the sales process for someone in the funeral business. Every business you have to sell, right? But in the funeral business, you're kinda cautious about how you sell, and like you said, your heart has to be in it. You can't be, like, upselling people over and over and over
Yeah.
and over again so that before they know it, it's like, "Hey, little Johnny passed away," but now it's like 18 grand because
Yeah.
you wanted everything, and you're just kind of exasperating that, terrible situation that the
Yeah,
family.
I remember, like, a while back, like, there was a family, because, sometimes, because people know that I work in the business, they would ask me questions, and, I like to say, like a lawyer, like, I can't give you any legal advice, but I always tell families, like, um, do what you feel is best for your loved one, like, because I know, like, a lot of times, sometimes families kind of fight.
Mm.
Sometimes they're like, well, I
Well,
think
it's a
you should,
stressful time,
yeah,
obviously, no
like,
matter
he
what,
should
and
wear
then you're
this.
you're putting money into it too. You're putting, like, death and family and money all together. It's like the
Oh
trifecta.
yeah. But it's like for the most part, like, I always feel like this. That's why I believe that everybody should have, like, a will. I think that everybody should kind of have things in place that way, like the family know what they want, because sometimes families fight over burial, fight over cremation,
Mm,
fight over inheritance. And I just think that sometimes when a person has their stuff in writing, it makes it a little more easier. I
mm.
know, like you said, a lot of people don't like to think about it, but I think it's better than have a family fighting.
Well, that's a good point because if you don't have anything on paper, then people may not even know if you wanna be cremated or you wanna, like, be embalmed or you wanna have an open casket or a closed casket, or do you wanna be buried or you wanna be made into a tree or a plant or spread your ashes, which maybe that means something to you while you're living, but you don't get to say it once you're passed away.
Yeah, that's true. So I just think that it makes it a lot more easier, because what you don't want, again, is, like, you just don't want a family coming into the office and then fighting and, cursing each other out and all. Man, they go down in that business, trust
Mhm. I'm
me.
sure you have situations where one half of the family comes in and they say, "Wade, we want this," and then the other half comes in and they go, "No, no, 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 don't do that, don't do that. We're doing this and this and this," and you
Yeah,
just go,
happens
"Dude, I
happens
don't wanna be in the middle of this. This is not."
happens all the man. I remember one time, I'll never forget it. This was the winter time, and they had a repast, which is like a luncheon next door. And these guys were in the repast, like, fighting over some chicken. It was crazy. I mean, but I'm pretty sure it just wasn't about the chicken, but I guess the chicken was enough to,
Yeah,
set it
yeah.
off.
It was the catalyst. Okay, so, like, talk to me about the economics of a funeral business. You obviously need the location.
Yep.
Presumably, you need some sort of, like, a license to, like,
Yep.
have bodies in the
So
building?
so every state is different. In the state of Illinois, you have to be a licensed funeral director and embalmer. For the most part, in some states you don't have to be licensed to own. Some states you do have to be licensed to own, but you do have to have a licensed funeral director and embalmer to, make sure that things are being done right. And I think for the most part, like it's a pretty lucrative business. I mean,
Mm.
like I said, but your heart really have to be in it because, oh man, because sometimes some people like, what, hey, stuff you put up with sometimes they be like, what, I think I go play golf or something,
Yeah. Well, I mean, any business where the barriers to entry are high or existing can generally become profitable. And
Yeah.
I imagine the primary barrier to the funeral business is just that there's not that many people who wanna be and spend time around dead bodies
Well,
and
I think,
the
but I
stressors you.
think now, because of like when COVID hit, I think there was a spike of people like jumping into the business because like now I think the
Interesting.
school that I went to had like a lot of people enrolling, but I think the thing is like any other business, you're gonna get a lot of people that enroll and stuff like that, but a lot of time when it come time to actually doing the job, some people is just not. Because I mean, I have people that I know personally that went to school, graduated, some even passed the test, and like Wade, I just can't. It's just not for me, man. I just can't do it.
Mm. So what is the expectation on a price of a funeral, and how do you arrive at that price both on the it's I'm a family and I need to, put the funeral together, and then how do you think about it as the sort of funeral director? How does that all come together?
So that's actually an awesome question. So basically, what I do love about this business is that every family that comes into your establishment must be given a general price list. And so a general price list is just letting the family know what everything costs, everything is transparent. But also it lets them know that they don't have to pay for certain things. Like if a person doesn't want their loved one embalmed, if they don't want to get a casket from you. Because I know, like, I say for instance, some mechanics, right? When you go to them to fix a part of your car and you show up with your own part, they're like, no, we don't need your part. So in the funeral business, whenever like families may decide that they want to get their own casket, that's their choice if they want to get it from you or not. I know some people might get mad, but I think, to be honest with you, for me, you should always a good funeral director always let a family knows what their options are. You know, I think, to me, that if you really love the business and you do your service well, you want to always let the family know what their options are and be transparent with people. Because the worst thing that anybody can do is like, because there is a lot of people that sometimes be like, man, them people get over on you.
Yeah.
It it,
They
it
got
may
you.
happen sometimes. So I think that it's really good for people to always know what their options are.
Mm.
But yeah, but you have to definitely let a family know what everything costs. You can make your own prices, but again, you have to just be transparent with what you're charging.
So, what are the things that when I walk into your type of office, I'm going to have like cost one, cost two, cost three? Like, what are the things I'm going to be thinking about?
So basically, what the family's gonna be thinking about is more like the casket, the urn, whether it's gonna be a burial or cremation. Those things do determines the factor. But see, as the funeral home, you don't determine the burial price because they have to do that with the cemetery.
Mm,
A lot of times with the crematory, they may have like their own set prices or whatever. But for the most part, as a funeral director, you're pretty much just comforting the family and helping the family decide what they want to do. You basically taking their loved one into your care, and you're going to make sure that that person is celebrated in the best way that they can be. And
mm,
so, like I said, so you can set your own prices, but a lot of times you just want to be fair, you
mhm.
know and it is a business, so you have to get your fair share too. But you don't want to overdo it though.
Mhm. Trust me, man. I believe in the free market. I think that you're gonna be a lot better at this job than letting the US government try to run the mortician industry.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so for you, I'm paying for the venue, presumably, and the time and the people. What about, like, embalming? Like,
Yeah. So
how
if
what is embalming cheaper? Is embalming more expensive? Is
well, I'm gonna be
cremation
honest with you.
expensive?
Well, what people have to realize is that embalming could be pricey. I think because first of all, people have to remember that whenever somebody is embalming, that embalmer is like kind of risking their health. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, because those chemicals are so. Like I said, so I mean, so there are safety precautions, but the person back there, that's their time. And then what people have to take into consideration is, and I'm just gonna be transparent about it. You never know what kind of shape the body's in.
Oh.
So sometimes to get a person to look like themselves, somebody may have to go go through a lot just to get the person to look just like. Because I mean, there are some funeral directors that are really good at what they do, and there are some funeral directors that really do take their time and they make sure that the loved one looks like they're supposed to look. And sometimes a lot of people just don't know what you went through to make that person look like themselves.
Interesting. So, like, maybe if someone was really old, like in their 90s, and they pass away, is that gonna be a more challenging case? Or is it like, was the body like sitting or
Sometimes it depends on like how the person died or what was wrong with the person, but for the most part, like I mean, I'm talking about sometimes when you have like brutal cases,
like
Yeah,
car accidents or,
yeah.
shootings, things like that?
Yeah, so like I think it's one of those things where if people saw what you really had to do, I think they would, I think some people would actually have more appreciation for, those because, like I said, it takes a very special and talented and skilled person to do that because embalming is something, trust me, it's you have to be really good at it.
Well, while we're on the topic, then talk me through what happens. Like, I don't even know if I understand step
So
one.
basically, so basically, what would happen is that if the family, the next of kin, signs an embalming authorization, giving you permission to embalm their loved one, well, what you would do is you would pick the loved one up, you would give the person a bath, and then you would make your incisions. Most time embalmers go through what is called the carotid artery. That's kind of like the more famous artery that's used. And you snip a hole, you take the cannula, you stick it down, and then as you drain the blood out, the fluid comes in. So as the fluid comes in, the blood comes out.
Okay, so you remove all the blood and then you're putting embalming fluid through the veins?
Yep.
And, like, is that, like, quite a lot of embalming fluid? And
Yeah.
it's also maybe a graphic, stupid question, but, like, where does the blood go? Are we
Well,
just, like,
so
is there a
basically,
biohazard at that point in time?
it's that's why I say the embalming room is it's pretty sacred room. Mainly like a steel table. But see, the thing is, water is always constantly running.
Mm.
So as the blood comes out, it's just being washed down. It's going right down the drain.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
not just sitting. It's always constant. It's always constant water movement going because you
Okay.
want to be as sanitary as possible.
Right. Well, I imagine that your health as the embalmer, like you said, is sort of in jeopardy. Like, we don't know that person could be sick or there could be like
Yeah.
a bacteria or pathogen or something that after they died or contributed to their
Yep.
death was kind of starting.
And,
Okay.
and see, I love that we both being transparent because again, like nowadays we live in the information era, so I think it's really good to be transparent with people.
What are the other things that have to happen then after that process? I presume that's not the end of it.
So once you embalm the body, what you definitely want to do as you're embalming, you want to check for any clots, like blood clots. You don't want those. You want to make sure that distribution is going through the body properly. You want to make sure the body's getting the right amount of fluid. And once you embalm the person, you also want to make sure that you aspirate. But I skipped one of the most important steps. Let me back up. Before you do any of that, after you give the loved one a bath, you definitely want to set the features, which is close the mouth, close the eyes, you know. So I mean, but other than that, the process is pretty much the same.
Are they going to become stiffer after they get embalmed? Is that what?
The tissue loosens up for a little while, then they get stiff. Yeah, because a
Mm,
lot of people like I thought they would be harder. No, a lot of times it's soft and then it firms later on.
mm, interesting. Okay, so you said after they are embalmed, you're dealing with what next? Gases in the
Yeah, so the
body?
next thing would be because you put it like this: you have arterial embalming and you have cavity embalming. So you would have cavity fluid, which goes directly into the cavity area. So
Mm,
basically, you would take an instrument called a trocar, you poke a hole like here, and it's kind of like you're pretty much just cleaning out. You're cleaning the cavity out, and
Mm,
then you're gonna make sure you put the fluid in to treat the rest of the body. So I mean, it's a pretty interesting process, and you definitely want to do that because you definitely want to make sure that you aspirate on the body properly. And again, like I said, if you're a good funeral director, good embalmer, you're gonna make sure you do it all. I was trained by the best. That's why.
mm. Yeah, and if you don't do that with, like, those gases, can those gases in the body, like, build up and cause issues?
Yeah, sometimes it may be leakage, a lot of things. So, and that's why, like I said, it's very good to be transparent because you want to educate and inform people about the process, you know,
Mm.
and that's one of the things that I love about this day and time we live in. Like, it's like everything is kind of out in the open, and I think that's a good thing because people have a right to know what they're paying for.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
At that point, is it then just, like, cleanup of the body, like hair, makeup, things like that?
So
Or
if you are going to cut any hair or shave anybody, I would recommend you do it before you start embalming. I just think it's probably better to do it that way, you know. Yeah.
mm, and then you clothe and they're ready for the big time?
Hmm.
Hmm, interesting. How long does
But
that process take from, like, start to finish?
so I would say that most times, like, some embalmers probably would take like, 45 minutes per case, but
Oh,
but then that depends on the case because everything is a case by case analysis. So like you may get a case that's, maybe may take you 2 hours.
mm.
It just, and like I said, depending on the condition of the remains, you go based off the it's just like an individual case. So it's kind of hard to put a time on it.
Now
Regular
is
case maybe about 45 minutes.
now that embalmed body, what is going to happen to that over time? Like, what is that gonna look like in a month, 6 months? Basically that's how they get entered in the casket, correct?
Yeah. So
So what's gonna happen to that body over
so
time sitting in
basically
that casket?
embalming doesn't stop decomposition, it just slows it down, you
Okay.
know.
So if you pull that body up in 6 months, it's probably gonna be, decomposing, but still somewhat there. But if you pull
Yeah.
it up in 10 years, there's not really gonna
Mhm.
be much
And
other
and then
than
and then
hard
too
tissue.
and then too that depends on the embalmer, that depends on the chemicals and all that stuff.
Interesting. So those chemicals are probably pretty harsh, yeah?
Yeah.
So you're probably, like, wearing gloves, you don't wanna get that on your skin.
Yeah, you definitely want to wear gloves. You want to wear your mask. You want to be, you want to wear your uniform. You know, your scrubs. Your lab jacket or whatever you want to wear. But you definitely want to keep yourself covered.
So do a lot of funeral homes also do crematory service, or is that usually a separate business?
It's a some funeral homes have their own crematory, and then some funeral homes kind of partner with other people. But I mean, for the most part, it's something that like a lot of more people are doing now. And I think it's just I think it's just a preference. Sometimes some people just say they don't want their family looking at them, like some people just don't want other people looking at them, so they just may choose cremation. And then some people still have a service and get cremated. It's just a preference.
Mhm. So knowing what you know about the industry, what would you do with your body?
I always tell my wife, if God decides to call me home, just have an immediate burial, no embalming, anything, just immediate burial.
Okay, so you would just put a body in a casket and just let nature take its course?
Yep.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I was talking to my mom. My mom works in infectious disease control,
Oh wow.
and I was like, "So what happens if I wanna, like, just bury myself in my, like, my yard or whatever?" And she's like, "You can't do that." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Why not?" And she's like, "It's infection risk, like, you can't have just, like, a dead body in your backyard." And I was like, "So what happens, like, if I don't, like, have any family?" She's like, "Well, the state might bury you, but, like, somewhere down the line, you're probably going to have to pay for something. Like,
Yeah,
there's
well, you know what?
no
That's
getting
actually
around it."
that's actually your mom hit it right on the head because when I was in mortuary school, we would embalm bodies of people that, like, some of the bodies were some people donated their bodies, and then some of the bodies were, like, people that maybe were going toward a mass burial that didn't have any family and stuff.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, so it's kinda interesting, like, one way or another, like, you need to get, like, the state or a mortician involved when you die. You can't just, like, go bury your husband, wife, brother, sister, cousin in the woods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want to, do things legally now.
Yeah. What about cremation? Like, what's your thoughts on that? You said that that wasn't, the way you would go, but what is, like, the breakout of people that choose cremation versus, like, embalming or does anyone do what you say? Just throw me into the ground?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people do direct burials. I think that, like, I think even, like, a lot of Jewish uh families do.
Mm,
Some people do embalming, but I think for the most part it's just a preference. I
mm,
think cremation is kind of, risen a lot more. I think a lot of more people are doing it, and like I said, it's not so much about the price. Some people just prefer it.
yeah. Well, one thing I can definitely tell you is I don't have any desire to be, like, embalmed and, like, put makeup on and, like, put in a suit and, like, put in a look, I'm not judging anyone, but I think that's just very strange. And you probably know about the history better than I, where there was like sort of like this disbelief that this person was dead.
Hmm.
So like family who hadn't seen them for many years, and or like sometimes there's like debt collectors or there were like wanted people. So they needed to like keep their body around long enough so the people could be like, oh, yep,
Yeah.
Wade's like I'm not going to collect my money from him now.
Yeah. You know what? I remember this old Vincent Price movie. I forget the name of that movie, but he was a mortician in it, and the guy wakes up in the funeral, and the guy said, "What am I doing here?" And Vincent Price tell him, "You're dead." He said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Oh, yes, you are."
More dead than alive. Uh, that's funny, man. Yeah, what about, like, I guess I never really thought about this, but you said that you have to pay to get buried in the plot somewhere generally, is that how that works?
Hmm.
I had no idea. So, are those, like, publicly owned plots? Like, there's someone whose, like, family owns a burial, like, a graveyard, essentially?
Some people, yeah. But I mean, like, there's like, I think, right now there are some owned by corporations, but
Mm,
within that corporation, people do purchase, land for them and their family. But yeah, it's a lot to think about because, again, like, a lot of times in that business, you would come across people that just never really thought about it, and that's why I think it's so important for people to have these type of conversations with their family. And I think that it's important even for people, like, to teach their children about it, and just, not as a spooky thing, but just let them know the reality of life.
mhm. So, all in, what do you typically see, like, people spending on, like, a funeral, a burial, a plot, maybe the casket? Like, what does that look like for people just to get them, like, a reality check?
Well, some people may spend 4,000, some people may spend 7,000. And I mean, and even with, the burial plots now, those things are, man, that can be expensive too.
Really?
Oh man, it's just, and it's, and I mean, I put it like this, it's kind of the way the world works, man. It's like everything costs, man.
Mhm. Death and taxes, and unfortunately, there's costs to dying too.
Absolutely, man. I'm telling you, I try to keep my life insurance paid, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are definitely policies out there. If someone's like, "Oh my god, this freaks me out," there's policies just like death policies.
Yeah, but I
Pay, like,
mean, but
$3
a lot,
a month
but
or
I,
something.
I try to, like, I tell people too, like, life insurance could be used for other things too, but it's good to have in place too in case anything happens.
Mhm. So, just the funeral business, man, it's a wild one, but, what do you feel like you've learned about the human body being in it?
Uh, well, for the most part, what I really just learned is, like, for me, I think it's more of a spiritual reminder that, like, time is precious,
Mm,
and I think also the human body is very unique. And to me, it's just always been interesting. It's like I think of it like a house, right? We live in this house, and then it's like you visited this house with this person, and then that person transitions, and it's like they moved; they're no longer there. You know,
Mm,
kind of like an empty house. You know,
right. But there's that weird ethereal thing that is,
yeah,
and I imagine you can kind of feel that that's not there when you have a body. Is that accurate?
yeah. I mean, because with me being in this business, like I've buried family members, you know, other people that were dear to me that I knew. So it's like every it hits everybody sometimes. And
This may be sort of a philosophical question, but what do you think that thing is? That spirit, that life, that like substance that we have and that like just can just change.
I definitely just think I definitely think it's a soul. I think people just go on to the next journey. And my thing is that's why like I tell people like you just do the best you can to treat people right.
Mhm. So maybe tell me some tips for living a good life now that you've seen the unfortunate end to so many lives. What are the funerals where you go and experience and you're like, that person, they lived a great life. I can.
I would say like my great great grandmother. I actually got to check. Like I knew my great great grandmother and my great grandmother just actually passed this year, but
Wow.
my great great grandmother, like when she died at the hospital, I remember she had told the doctors like they resuscitated her, but she told them don't bring me back no more.
Mm,
Like she was like, okay, I'm ready. Like you know,
mm,
and I kind of look at like the people that I kind of personally knew that kind of had those same type of stories. Like they wasn't afraid of it. Like
mm.
kind of like lived a good life. I say nobody's perfect, but for the most part, you fear God and do the best you can. So you know, yeah,
Yeah, I would just imagine that there's certain funerals that you're at and you're like, wow, like people clearly loved this person. Like
yeah,
they have so many people here and so many good stories and like so many like interesting things that they were able to do. And not to, say that anyone's life was less important, but I'm sure you also are at funerals where you're like, there weren't many people here and they didn't have very many nice things to say about this person.
yeah. It's interesting, and to me, it's just like, and that's why, like I always say, like just treat people right. Yeah, I remember, and this is something that really stuck with me. Like I remember, like a couple of years ago, we did a service for this one guy's mom, and I was standing in the hallway talking to this guy. And 3 weeks later, we were putting the casket in the chapel, and I opened it up. It was the guy I was talking to. This
Whoa.
was like 3 weeks later, so like it's like you know, it just teaches you like to appreciate people.
Yeah. I actually heard someone talking about this. They had a friend that passed away and he wasn't that old. So it was, disappointing. But they said they went to the funeral and he said, when I came back home after it, I realized that the only things that people were talking about were like the weird quirks that this person had. Essentially, like the things that this person did that made them different from everyone else. Like no one talked about like, oh, Wade, like he really liked to eat cereal in the morning and like he really loved black coffee and like he would, go for a walk at lunch. No, it was like all the eccentric things like that's crazy. Wade was a professional wrestler, right? So it was sort of a like eye-opening moment for him because he's like, all the things that you do that are like quote unquote weird, like those are the things that make you who you are. And those are the things that people are going to remember about you when you're gone. So sort of like lean into those things and just be who you are, be unapologetically yourself, because that's what people like about you.
Yeah. And it really kind of makes you, you're right. It really make you think about your own mortality.
Hmm.
And I think that's why, like for me, I always tell people like, don't waste your time. Like, live your life, you know, and don't look too far down the road too much. Like, take everything one day at a time,
Mm.
and don't wait to live. Like, you have the ability to live now. Cause like sometimes like as people, we chase after things that we think might make our life better, but sometimes you gotta enjoy where you are.
Yeah, there's a quote that I love, and it's, "You've already accomplished so many of the things that you once told yourself would make you happy." So it's kinda like, "Oh, like, well, if I start a business, I'll be happy." And then it's like, "Okay, you did it." It's like, "Oh, if we do $1,000,000 in sales, I'll be happy." And, "Oh, okay, you did it." If we
Yeah.
do, like if we have 10 employees, we'll be happy. If we buy a building, like, if we can and you keep going down this list, and it's like, yeah, we already did a lot of those things.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
you've accomplished the things that you vowed in the future would make you happy, but, like, you're not yet because we'll always move the goalpost one skip out in front. Well, okay, yeah, we've done 100,000,000 in total sales, but now we wanna do 1,000,000,000 in total sales, and it's like, to your point, let's just enjoy it for a couple of seconds. Let's, like, actually live in this moment, and I think
Yeah.
we as humans have a really tough time living in the now.
And you know what? And honestly, like I can say, like, I share this with some people now because like those who knew me knew this, but like, it got one point in my life where I was spending so much time at that funeral home, I ended up developing like a vocal disorder.
Mm,
It's called spasmodic dysphonia. A lot of people don't know what it is, but it's like if you get stressed, your voice strains real bad.
mm.
And it was kind of funny because like when I remember going to like I was talking to the doctor, they were trying to get me to like take these injections and all this stuff, but I did my own research and I realized that all you gotta do is get rid of the stress.
Whoa.
So when I got rid of the stress, my voice got better. So but I said all that to say like, you have to take time out to live your life and don't sweat the small stuff. It's yeah.
So, having been around death, a lot, what are your thoughts on death? Do you have a fear of death, or do you have, like, an acceptance of it?
Uh, I have more of an acceptance of it. But I just like I say I'm Christian, so my thing is this is just um you do the best you can. You love Jesus, love people, but treat people right.
Mm,
And don't hate anybody. I look at it like we're human beings and people make mistakes. And people aren't perfect. Everybody don't see eye to eye. People think things differently, but I always say like let people be who they are, and let them live life and they'll learn. And so to me, it's just like don't never try to control somebody else. Like live your life.
mm.
That's kind of my biggest philosophy.
Yeah, I kinda try to think of it sorta how the Stoics used to think about it. It's that memento mori, like, remember you will die. And it's funny because Marcus Aurelius, he was one of the Roman emperors, one of the 5 good emperors, but he wrote a book now that was, now it's super famous, but it was like his daily journal, and it was not supposed to get published. It's called
Oh wow.
Meditations now. And this was written, like, gosh, I don't know, probably, like, almost 1,500, 2,000 years ago. And he wrote, like, in his journal, he's like, "Remember, you will be gone. One day you'll be forgotten. No one will remember your name. No one will remember that you wrote these things down," which is kind of, like, crazy because everyone now does
Yeah.
remember. And what but his idea there was, like, this is just fleeting, like, not to say that nothing's important, but, like, nothing is that serious. Nothing matters that much, like, take yourself with a grain of salt in the larger picture that someday in the future, you're gonna be gone, forgotten, returned to ashes, if you will.
Yeah.
You have to think about, like, your here and now and just do your best, to your point. Do your best.
Yeah, I think there was a basketball player too. I think they asked him once, like, how you feel about like not getting a championship now? And I think he was like, another 200 years from now, that's not even gonna matter.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's basically Stoic wisdom that's been around for thousands of years that you just have to focus on the here and now. Everyone's gonna forget your name in the future. It's something like what? Like 2 generations from now, like your well, you obviously know your great-great-grandmother, great-great-great, I think you said maybe even. But most people like, I don't know my great-grandparents. Like, I know my grandpa, I don't know my great-grandpa. Never met him. He was never alive for me. I don't think I know his name. Like, maybe we have, like, a family album with him, like, somewhere, but it's sad because you wanna be like, "Hey, I respect these people that brought me into the world," but
Yeah.
reality is it's just hard to keep up with that.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I look at it as like, you live your life and you make the most, you know.
And you live it the way you wanna live it, which, Wade, sounds like you are, my man. Uh, talk to me, let's transition a little bit to, where do you wanna start? First, pro wrestling or filmmaking?
Well, I can talk about either one. Which one would you prefer?
We'll start with wrestling, and we'll round things out with filmmaking, because I
Gotcha.
mean, you're Wade, the independent filmmaker. I wanna hear about that, but, like, how in the world did you get into wrestling, bro?
So I actually wrestled freshman year in high school, but I
This
quit.
is real wrestling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Olympic wrestling, freestyle Olympic wrestling.
and then I wrestled in my senior year of
Okay.
high school. But anyway, I was gonna make a documentary on pro wrestling. So there's a guy in Chicago
Mm.
by the name of Steve Boz. He was in WWE, some other promotions. I ended up, connected with him, and he invited me to the school where they had like where they train you for pro wrestling. So he introduced me to some of the wrestlers. Like, I don't know if you watch AEW, but like Sky Blue, Axel Rico, some of the up and coming wrestlers he introduced me to. Then I end up meeting my best friend there, Levi and John. But anyway, yeah, we started. He like, when you gonna start training? So I'm like, I'll start next week.
Yeah.
So I ended up. So this was during COVID. So like I ended up training, but because I was working at the funeral home, I'm like, look, I'm not gonna quit my job,
Yeah.
to travel the world and get my back broken, none of that stuff. Like,
Yeah, man, it's a dangerous
it
thing.
is. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, but I did it more as a hobby. So, it wasn't like I wasn't trying to pursue a career. I did it for a hobby. So,
Yeah.
it was fun though. Like, I got a chance to meet like a couple of people from WWE. I met Scotty 2 Hotty, I met Carlito, met Hornswoggle. It was cool, getting a chance to, train and meet everybody and just have a little fun. But it got to the point where, like, I'm like, okay, like, this is just a hobby, so I'm not gonna devote too much time to this.
Well, did you use the opportunity to make your nickname the Mortician, or did
Absolutely. So my so
Alright, absolutely, good.
yeah, so I'm working on trademarking my wrestling name, but it's actually the $1 Million Mortician.
Ah, I like it. Alright, alright. The Undertaker, unfortunately, that was already been used.
Yeah, but but that's another thing too, right? Like, when you come up with these names, right? Like, I thought about like not even using that gimmick, only because like I didn't want nobody like, he's trying to be like the Undertaker, but I was gonna be healed. I'm gonna say no. According to the state of Illinois, I am the Undertaker.
So where'd filmmaking come in for you, man?
So I've been wanting to do that ever since I was a child, and photography. I used to write stories and stuff like that as a child. But actually, while I was in mortuary school, at one point it was like, okay, if this don't work out, I'm gonna have to go to school for something else. So I didn't have to go for filmmaking, but I chose to. So
Mm,
I went to school for filmmaking, and then I just started producing my own content.
so talk to me about what you primarily make.
So I have a web series called Love Always Wins. And the reason why I made it was actually because when I was in film school, I was thinking about like pitching like this like kind of biography like about my life. But it was like, I was gonna have somebody else play a character similar to me. But because I was a young black male from Chicago, I worked in the funeral business, so I had a pretty unique background.
Mhm.
So my teacher was like, well, wait, why don't you tell your own story? So I ended up doing it, but like the first episode, I had an actor to play me. They didn't show up.
Ah, well, then, yeah, that's a sign.
But this my thing, like I had to pay everybody to be there. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna waste my money. So I just started doing the part. So
There you go.
so
Well,
that's how that came about.
I mean, there's been plenty of actors, directors out there.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm actually moving more towards being a documentarian.
I heard you say that.
I love documentaries, and like
I do too, man. I think that's a fun one.
to me, I like them better than narrative films. So, like right now, I'm literally working on a documentary about my web series, and I'm gonna put it on Amazon Prime or Tubi or one of them. But yeah, So I've already talked to them about that. So I'm working on that now.
So tell me what about your web series. So what is the like what's it gonna look like?
So basically, it's like because like you know what, you see a lot of documentaries on people that like doing really big things, but I'm like, you know what? Why don't you make a documentary about what you're doing as it while it's happening?
Yeah.
Because like a lot of people like they take their work because like most filmmakers, I'm not gonna say all of them, but a lot of them like they do work when they first start out and they shelve it.
Yeah, because they're like, "Ooh, this sucked. I don't want
Yeah.
anybody to see this."
But to me, I think it's important to document your journey because it might actually inspire somebody. You
Well,
know.
I think that that's really popular right now, actually.
Hmm.
People appreciate, like, the authenticity. Uh,
Yeah, because like you know, I learned so much about filmmaking that I didn't know, right? Like because you know, we all like most of us grew up watching people on TV and all that good stuff, but for the most part, like you know, when you actually have your own journey and you have like the option to like you know be independent or you know kind of do the Hollywood thing, and you really find out like being independent is actually the better route. I think that's so cool. You know,
yeah. Well,
I really think it's cool.
to your point, 2 documentaries that I thought of right off the top of my head. The Kanye West documentary, that
Yeah.
was cool, not because, like, you're watching Kanye today. It's cool because you went back to when he was, like, struggling and, like, not making any money, and he wasn't that famous, and they basically had footage all the way until he's, the most famous person on planet Earth.
Yeah, and I actually met one of the guys that worked on that documentary.
There you
Back
go. That
in the
was a great one. That was a
Jay Ivy, yeah, but you know what, that was pretty cool because like I think it's important to be like transparent because like I think it's easy for people to be like, you know, oh this person did this big stuff and all that. But when you think about it, you know, they're human just like us. And everybody has struggles. And I think that if you sometimes if you cover things up, I think that you kind of you devalue it. You know, I think when you kind of be more transparent with people and show them like, man, it was rough, and I, you know, and this happened and that happened. I think to me, it's more inspirational because like you know you saw what they overcame.
Yeah, the other one I was thinking of was the Conor McGregor documentary. They had footage of him when he was, like, just starting into the UFC, like, not
Oh wow,
like, "Oh, I'm already the double champ,"
I
and it's
got to check
cool
that
'cause
out.
yeah, oh, that's a good one, man. Because now he is what he is, and gosh, who knows if he'll even ever fight again, but they had it when he was, like, young and hungry, and he was just like, "I want the title, I want the title, I want it so bad," which was cool because you kinda know how the story ends, like, he gets there, and you see the rise to fame, and you can see, like, how he changes and everything, but to your point, it's cool, not because, like, we're starting the documentary after he's already the double champ. It's like, okay, like, that's a certain thing, but I'd much rather see the person on the way up.
Yeah, and I think that that's really cool because like for me, right, you know, and I always like, you know, I always give credit to who is due, but I remember like, you know, at one point in my life when I was in school to be a mortician and I had just finished and I was taking the exit exam and I'm like, you know what, if I don't pass this test, I'm gonna have to do something. So I remember seeing one of my fellow high school classmates. His name is Alexander, and he goes by Alley Cat the Rapper. I remember seeing him like rapping, and I'm like, you know what? That's pretty cool. Like that he's still doing this or whatever, and he's still doing this thing. And so when I saw that, that kind of like really inspired me. Like, you know what? Why don't you just chase your dream and pursue your art, you know? And then I turned around and then Alexander ended up getting signed by Jim Jones. So
Mm,
I thought that was pretty cool, you know. So like, you know, I see a lot of people like even my little cousin like Kamarian, he's doing some, you know, pretty big things, you know, acting and stuff like that. You know, acting on some pretty good shows, like he was on Power and a couple of other shows.
mm,
But yeah, so and that even stemmed from him like working with me on the school project. So
mm.
like, you know, so to me, I'm having a blast. Like I'm enjoying the journey, not the destination, as my friend John say.
Well, it's interesting you say that because when they talk to people I saw this interview, with a rapper, a real famous rapper, and he was being interviewed by, like, a podcaster who, like, was pretty small. It was not, like, a big podcaster at the time, and the rapper was basically like, enjoy these moments right here when you are struggling and you are grinding and you're like not there and you have to like fight for everything because those are the moments that you're gonna look back on. You're gonna be like, those were my most favorite. And
Yeah.
he's like, now I've made it. Like, it's not the same any longer. I've like kind of reached escape velocity. I don't have to struggle, which is a cool in a different way. But when you look back on all those times where you're like, God, that sucked, but it was like pretty cool that I did it.
You know what? It's funny you say that, right? Because I remember one time this podcaster, she was telling me like, how she wanted my cousin. She didn't want me on the show, right? She like, look, get your cousin because he's acting on Power and all that stuff. But to me, it's like it is kind of fun because like when you believe in yourself, you know the potential that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You you know that it's gonna end up being great, but it's like but you just keep on working toward it.
Yeah, and another one that I like to think about is whenever you're doing something and you're doing it and it sucks and it's not working and you're just like, God, I just don't feel like I can get anywhere with this thing. It's a great reminder to be like, oh, this is when people quit. Like, this is when everybody quits because they're like, oh, this sucks. Like, being a filmmaker's like not a good idea. Like, there's no money. Like, how am I gonna monetize it? Like, starting a podcast is stupid. Like, there's so many of them. Why would anyone listen to mine? You go, oh, this is when everyone else quits. So if you can just keep like pushing through that thing, like
Yeah,
everyone who's ever made it has had to push through that thing. And part of it is just being too dumb to be like, yeah, I'm gonna quit this thing.
yeah, and I think you make a really valid point there because like most of the greatest success stories you hear is always that part of the story was like, oh, it looked like nothing was gonna happen, you know.
Mhm.
And then kind of like when you least expect it, then like then it ends up happening. So like that's the thing though, right? Like to me, you just keep having fun along the way, you know.
Sounds like you got a positive attitude towards it. So you have your documentary going on. Talk to me about what that process looks like.
So actually last September, I actually screened rough screening of my documentary, but I'm not gonna lie, like it was just kind of like a brief taste of like appreciation for the people that helped, but actually the real documentary is being made now. So some of the footage that was supposed to go into that one I'm gonna use, but they're gonna like re-interview me and stuff now.
Mhm.
And I mean, we're gonna just make it good. We're gonna make it interesting, and you're gonna get a chance to see like all of the people who like helped me, and and even some of the actors, because like I have like one actor that works with us. She's doing some really big things on the East Coast. Young lady, she's doing some pretty tremendous things. So like she hasn't like filmed on set with us yet. So like we gonna put everything together so that everybody can just see everybody that helped.
Mm, that's awesome, man. Where do you see it going? Will that kind of series of the documentary continue on with you as you continue making films? Have you thought that through?
I think so. Well, I think for me though, I think like I'm moving more towards my like out of my narrative filmmaking phase, and I'm pretty much strictly kind of investing my time more in just docs because I'm also working on the documentary about training for pro wrestling too. So
Mm,
like I really want to just at some point just stick to making documentaries because like that's really my favorite part of filmmaking.
mhm,
But I also want to like the people that has helped me with my web series. I want to keep being able to give to them too, like keep being able to work with them. So like, I'm just gonna keep it going until we decide we don't want to do it no more. But in
mhm,
the meantime, like I just want to make the documentary because I want to put it out to a wider audience. But I want them
mhm,
to actually see the documentary because I feel like we're gonna make that one like we're gonna make the quality a whole lot better.
mhm. That's how I try to operate, man. I just try to suck a little bit less at podcasting. Every podcast, every like in video episode we do, we just try to make little tweaks and you just get a little better. And I think this is one of the things that people have a hard time understanding is that no matter where you start, like it's not going to be great. And you're going to learn a bunch of things that you didn't know. And you're going to figure things out. And you're going to go, oh, shoot, we forgot this cable. Now we know we need to bring this cable next time.
Yeah,
No way to get there without just like eating crap all the way along and being like,
you're right.
you know
And
what? If
you're
nobody
absolutely
watches
right.
this, maybe that's for the better because like maybe this wasn't very good. but that's how it goes.
Yeah, but you know what, you do learn as you go, because like, it's one thing is just like having an idea in your head, but like when you actually, you know, go for it, you see that sometimes it's a lot more to it than you think, but you make it work. You work with what you have at the time until you can do a little bit better. But I mean, if you don't step out there and try, you don't really know what you can do.
Hmm. It's kind of like watching a sport that you don't sort of understand, and you're like with a bunch of people who love it, and you're like, I just don't get this. But then you start playing it, and you're like, oh yeah, oh I understand now. You're like, oh shoot, this is really, really difficult. Like, wow, now I understand those people's appreciation for it. Because
Yeah.
they were in it a little bit, and they kind of have like already taken some of those lumps. So now I'm sure for you, like when you watch documentary, you're like watching it really like a fine eye, like, oh, I love the way they did this, and I love the way that they transitioned here and how he posed these questions. I mean, half of documentary filmmaking is just storytelling, right? You're kind
Yeah.
of just using what's been told to you to tell the story.
Yeah, and like for me, like I watch documentaries about like different people. Like I watched one the other day, like on Dr. Dre, when I was down in Arizona.
Is that the like multi-part series one
I
or
think it's something like that. I watched one like on Miley Cyrus. I watch a lot of them on like Walt Disney. But I mean, for the most part, like I think it's really interesting because a lot of people that got successful, right? A lot of some of the stuff they did, right, was like this was stuff they started doing after they tried. Cause like when you think about Walt Disney, right, he didn't start out making features; he was making shorts.
mm,
What Snow White was the first full length animated feature, but at first he was just making shorts. He was doing like the Alice in Wonderland shorts, the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, then the Mickey Mouse shorts. And even Walt Disney said out of his own mouth, he said that you have to be careful when you're making features because you got to keep people's attention for like an hour and 10 or 20 minutes, something
yeah.
like that. But when you're making shorts, like you can just you can tell a story and you don't have to like do a whole lot. So like shorts are kind of fun.
Mm.
And I mean, it was really cool hearing him say that because like that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people that do great things, they start out on one journey, but it kind of just turns into you know, something else.
Yeah. Is that something you've, toyed around with the idea of, like, having a YouTube channel where you, like, put content out that's maybe just, like, various quick ideas? You're like, "Okay, I had this idea," or are you thinking, like, when I put stuff out, I want it to be feature length?"
Well, honestly, like me, I like shorts. I mean, well, because I'm getting more into distribution, you gotta make stuff a little longer because that's kind of
Mhm.
procedures. But other than that, I enjoy making shorts.
Yeah. I actually had a
Because-
guy on the podcast. He has a pretty successful YouTube channel. His name's Damon Cassidy, and he would be, like, in between. He would make, like, 20-minute videos, but he would do it like storyteller style, and it
okay.
would be like, something along the lines of why did the great financial crisis happen? And then he'll, like, tell the story kind of from start to finish. He'll use, like, pictures and history, and he's got a really cool style. I
Oh,
kind
nice.
It's kinda just something that popped into my head that you can kinda still do, like, a short form, but it is sort of a documentary, and it's nice for him because he doesn't need to get other people involved to tell the story, right? He doesn't need actors or, like, interviews. He can go through the history of it.
I'm gonna check them out. Yeah, and that's another thing too, right? You got to build yourself up too a little bit.
There's just so many things out there, man, but you're doing it, you're already getting content out, so that's, I think, the most important thing. Um, do you have, various filmmakers or documentaries that have kind of left an impact on you that you appreciate their style and wanna utilize things you've seen there?
Well, believe it or not, I have more so like I wouldn't say just one documentary, but I have like certain filmmakers that I get inspired by. Like George Lucas is one,
Yeah.
uh, Spike Lee is another one, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because what I actually like about George Lucas, right? Like when he created Star Wars, he did like the type of movies that he liked. And a lot of times when you think about the film business, right, it is an industry, so they're worried more about sales. But
Mhm.
like George Lucas, he was just like to the point where he wanted to create something that he just wanted to watch, something that he liked, but it ended up being a hit. So I respect him as an artist because like he didn't let them take that from him. And I think that that's a great thing, right? When you can create something that like people like. I don't see how this gonna work, and then it turned out to be like one of the greatest ideas. Like I like that kind of stuff. Spike Lee, he was independent, so I admire people like that.
Well, I mean, not to, keep talking about the podcast world, but that's exactly what Joe Rogan did. He was like, I just record and do the conversations that I like to have. Like, I don't have any agenda. I'm not going to have Brad Pitt on because I think that it's going to get clicks. Like, if I don't want to talk to that person, I just don't talk to him. So he ends up talking to like just his buddies and comedians for like 60 to 70% of the show. And it's worked. Like, you could say like, Wade, that's a terrible idea just to make the movies you want to make. But like, it's clearly worked for so many people. Even, I mean, shoot, if you look at someone like Quentin Tarantino, he was like, I just want to make a movie like my style, like in the way that I want to make it. And everybody's like gonna think that I'm crazy and this is, the strangest thing they've ever seen. But he's like, I don't know. Let's see what happens. That's kind of what I've done with the podcast. Like, I just try to make a podcast that I enjoy, that I want to listen to, conversations that I have fun doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like the audience will take that.
I like, and you know what? I like that because like basically, like, I understand why they do it because their biggest idea is just sales, But when you think about it, sometimes, like, I think that is a great thing to see people with more originality and people kind of putting themselves into it because, like, we already know, like, art is subjective, right? Like, you got some people that like it, some that won't, but a lot of times you have a lot more in common with people than you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's kind of unique. Like when somebody comes along to do something a little different, I think it stands out a lot more.
Well, I mean, this is something I've said before, but an adventurer, an explorer, said this. He said that if you want to live life on a 10, sometimes you got to be prepared for ones. But most people just want to live life on 6. So like I want 6 where it's like I sleep in a comfortable bed every night and I get like pretty good food and like I'm never super hot or super cold or like I never have to go 36 hours without eating. But he's like, I want to live life with some 10s. So like I climb Mount Everest and like there's some 1s during that climb. Like it's negative 40 degrees and it's brutal and I can't feel my hands. I can't feel my toes. And I legitimately might get frostbite and lose my toes. He's like, but when you make it to the top, he's like, that's a 10. And I kind of think of it almost like the art that you're describing. Like if you think about some of these cult classic movies, like the first one that popped into my head was Edward Scissorhands. When they were making that, I'm sure they're like, this is fucking weird. But we think it's kind of cool. And we're betting there's going to be some people out there that think that's kind of cool. And some people watch it and they're like, that's a 1. That's the weirdest movie I've ever seen. But then some people got out and they were like, that was a 10. But if they were just trying to make like a 6, it would have just been like a generic romance movie, like that you'd probably end up forgetting about and wouldn't mean anything like we talked about 100 years later.
Yeah, and and that's why like 2 of my favorite movies would be The Crooklyn's and then The Bronx Tale.
I haven't seen either of those, man.
Oh man, because like what I like about The Bronx Tale, right? Like there's a quote in the movie that said the saddest thing in life is wasted talent,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good man. I mean, The Bronx Tale is like a really good movie though. The Crooklyn is too. Like that's one of my favorites too.
Crooklyn and The Bronx Tale. I gotta check that out. Do you have a favorite documentary then?
My favorite documentaries probably would be like, to be honest with you, like anything like about like Walt Disney, anything about like Snoop Dogg, to me, I just like seeing stories of people that I really like, interested in what they've done.
Yeah,
But I mean, for the most part, like I've seen like, some documentaries about like lesser known filmmakers that I really enjoyed. That were pretty cool. Like this one filmmaker brought like a documentary to the school when we was in film school. I like that one. I forget the name of it, but yeah. But I like random stuff,
I got one for you that you maybe never watched, but if you watch it, this one will probably blow your mind. The documentary is called The Farthest Voyager in Space. It's about the Voyager space shuttles that were launched. I think they were launched in the 70s. But they're 1977. They're 2 unmanned spacecrafts that are still, I don't want to spoil it for you, but they're still traveling through space. They're legitimately like, I don't see a number, but they're like 1 trillion miles away now at this point in time. and they have left our solar system, and
Oh,
they're still actually getting signals from them.
wow.
So they built these in the 70s. So this was 1970s technology. So they didn't have like a lot of tech, but it's unique because it was at a very specific time where they could do this. And it's only like every 150 years or something where these planets line up in a certain way that they can slingshot around them. And they cut like an enormous amount of travel time for the spacecraft, like 50 to 100 years off to
Oh,
get
wow.
them like out to outer stellar space.
Yeah,
So yeah, dude, you got to watch that one. It's called The Farthest thing in the universe, the Voyager story.
I
That's a
gotta
great.
check that out. Yeah, my wife took me to a documentary too when we were down in Arizona. She took me to like a Black History documentary. I thought that was pretty cool too, like James Baldwin. Um,
Mm,
it's just because like you learn a lot about people that you didn't know. You
mm-hmm.
know, I think it's pretty cool.
I dig it, man. Well, Wade, is there anything that we didn't cover, man? We covered the mortician industry, we covered filmmaking, we covered pro wrestling. Anything else out there that you want to talk about?
I think we pretty much covered everything. I'm just having a blast being on.
Wade, man, it's been a lot of fun. Tell people where they can find you and find your stuff. And if we're looking for the documentary out there in the future, where will we find that?
All right, so you can find my work on Vimeo. It's Wade Filmmaker 777 on Vimeo. I got a ton of interviews on YouTube, and I guess this is gonna be added to it. So you can check us out there, and also be on the lookout because when I finish my documentaries, wherever the distributor put them for me, that's where they're gonna go.
Heck yeah, man. So do you think that would be also available like on YouTube?
Probably so.
Sweet, man. I'm
I
excited
mean,
for it.
you gotta try to make a little money off your work sometimes.
Yeah, you got to get them out there, man. You give it away, and then the cycle starts where you start to bring people into your ecosystem. That's what we're working on.
Yep.
Wade, man, this was a lot of fun.
Man, I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, man. If you're in Columbus, you know where to find us.
I got you. Maybe I come in person next time.
That'd be fun, man. We're building a new facility. I keep telling everybody we're building a new building, so we're gonna have like a pretty legit setup, pretty cool studio in there.
Nice.
Heck yeah, Wade. All right, thank you, man.
All right, thank you.